Thanks for checking out our case study videos. We should have a bunch of these by the time I get done making them. Hopefully you find some things that resonate for you. But this one is kind of important to me because we see a lot of this. And sometimes I think all of us need to remember that we're the hero of our own story. And so getting to Bright Futures or getting into a hard to get into college, it goes a little past what you know. It goes into the realm of self-awareness and confidence. So let's talk about Bill. Not his real name, but he's a dad from Northwest Florida who has a daughter named Amber, also not a real name. And she was, his words, a real sweetheart. And our experience was exactly that. Unfailingly kind. She babysat and loved it. And she had such organization and consistency to the babysitting, even had a quasi-employee, that Bill thought of it as a business, although Amber felt embarrassed whenever he called it that. She had solid grades, but she worked very hard for them, and Bill and his wife, which was Amber's stepmom, consistently reinforced that hard work will take you farther than anything. Perspective I agree with. But Amber was very self-conscious that she wasn't as smart as some of her friends and classmates, especially in dual enrollment courses. She had a 3.65 unweighted GPA. So her GPA should have been a lot higher. And she did everything right. She got almost perfect grades on everything except tests. Big tests made her anxious. She'd sleep poorly the night before. On the test, she'd freeze, ruminate, change answers, sometimes run out of time. Her test grades were often low B's and C's. So Bill had saved money for college. But obviously he hoped that Amber would get Bright Futures. And Amber wanted Bright Futures too. She was very, very, very forward thinking. Even more than Bill, she wanted it. Because she was so conscientious, she thought that getting Bright Futures was the right thing to do for her family. It was her duty. This was a lot of pressure for a 17-year-old who underperforms on tests. So she was studying, but Bill wondered how effective it was because she seemed to feel overwhelmed and clueless about where to start. And it showed. She took the ACT once. She got a 19. This was February of her junior year. Bill says there were a lot of tears in the house that day. Days later, Amber was still depressed. She told her stepmother, that she could never achieve her dream of being a pediatric nurse practitioner. Things got a little bit better as time passed. But as the April test date approached, Bill's daughter seemed to feel helpless. It was getting worse again, and she definitely was miserable. So Bill had heard about us from a coworker whose son did ACT prep and college admissions work with us a couple years prior. But to Bill, the coworker's son seemed to be the exact opposite of his daughter. One, it was a boy, and this was like a naturally confident whiz kid who never seemed to face any serious academic resistance. But calling us was a place to start. And they only had a month before Amber's next ACT in April. So he reached out to us. I talked to him on the phone. I calculated her actual ACT score was a 19.25. The ACT rounds up at 0.5, so if she got like one little point on anything, she'd be at a 20. But she needed a total of 21 points to get up to a 24.5, which rounds to a 25. Bill told me in the conversation he liked how upfront I was. I told him 6-point score gain in 3.5 weeks is really unlikely. But I understood how his daughter was feeling because we see it year in and year out, dozens and dozens and dozens of kids. And the lack of confidence is something we work to address. So I scheduled a diagnostic session and I assigned it to Fabiha. Fabiha is great with kids like this. She met Amber the next day and they worked on reading first because it was Amber's best score and therefore most confident section. And Fabiha wanted to give her some wins to go. They moved on to grammar and then finally math, which was that 16. So that night, Bill gets home from work. They sit down as a family, talk about the diagnostic, the test guide, the ACT. Amber tells her dad that she felt nervous at first, but Fabiha made her feel comfortable and supported, that they even did math and it wasn't a nightmare, that Fabiha told her that she wasn't bad at all. She just was balled up. So Bill and I talked. We made a plan. Shoot for a 25. Don't expect it. In fact, we're telling Amber we're definitely taking 2 tests, so there's no pressure here. We're going to super score focusing on 2 sections at a time, adapting in between tests depending on her results. And we're setting her up with 2 tutors, Fabiha and Jan. Fabiha on the quantitative, Jan on the qualitative. So Amber's life was really only wrapped up in babysitting at this point. She did play a fall sport, but it wasn't fall. Her other extracurriculars were mostly in-school things. The babysitting took 25 or so hours a week, but our flexible scheduling allowed her to work around babysitting and we did 3 appointments a week because we had 3.5 weeks of trying to hit it hard. So our plan was, which we did, to use 9 of the 15 hours that Bill bought for April, save 6 for June. Now, normally we don't address the low one right away. She would have to at some point, because with a 16 on math, she'd have to essentially get a 28 on every other section. The other problem with having a 16 on math is placement. So when you enroll in college, if you're below generally a 20, colleges make you take a placement test in math or English. If you don't do on the placement test, you have to pay the college to take a no-credit remedial course. Now, that doesn't usually jive with a kid that has no confidence, so usually we'd leave that alone initially. But that often is not always, right? And so in this case, Fabiha felt that Amber's math could be much higher if we addressed 3 problems. And we didn't need all 3 to work at the same time. 1, she got stuck. And so she ended up guessing on the last 15 to 20 math problems. 2, content weaknesses. She knew more math than she thought. There were a lot of areas where she had maybe 90% of what she needed to get the question right. If we could just top her off on a lot of things and fill in some of the bigger gaps for questions that we know are going to show up 3 or 4 times, we could fix a lot of this. The one of the 3 we had to have is the last one, confidence. We could lift her math score by at least 5 points with 2 of the 3 things, but one of them had to be confidence. Confidence was irreplaceable. And while these are 3 distinct problems, they're all related. Just like anything with how human beings work is related. Confident test takers are less likely to get stuck. And that missing 10% can often be overcome by assertiveness, which is confidence. And so Amber was going to work with Fabiha on math twice a week and Jan on grammar once a week, and that's our other section. Now, we've had dozens and dozens of students at Amber's high school, and they tend to underperform on grammar. Amber was a reader, she read for fun, and she had wildly outperformed everything else in reading comp. Okay, that means she can do grammar. She just needed help that fit her. Fabiha identified 2 key issues with grammar performance. Jan concurred. She hadn't been taught grammar in any consistent student-friendly way. This is almost always the case with high schools in the Florida Panhandle. Second, she was overwhelmed. She needed a playbook to quickly identify what sort of questions she was dealing with. She needed to pare down the universe. Then she could apply simple strategies, mark off, get an answer, move on, building confidence. No more overwhelm, no more rereading. So her confidence grew as she went through tutoring, especially after she really got the belief down that she didn't need to worry about the other 2 sections. It didn't matter this time. The section strategies helped because they made her feel more assured of her answer, building confidence as she went. She learned not to get stuck, lose time and confidence by understanding this is so important. The ACT is not a game of getting everything right. It's about getting the most right you can get right. So she had cut the world of things to focus on dramatically, and that helps confidence, overwhelm, anxiety a ton. And Jan and Fabiha spent a lot of time pointing out, talking her through her progress so she would believe it and see it for herself, because this is a girl that underplays herself. The night before the test, instead of locking herself in a room like she had in February, she went out to Whataburger with her friends. And so next morning, Amber's stepmom drops her off at the test center. So about 2 weeks later, the scores come in. She picked up 14 out of the 21 points she needed in 3.5 weeks. English was a win with room to grow. She even got a bonus point on science, most likely because she wasn't so emotionally and mentally exhausted. Her math score went up almost 2 standard deviations. It was no longer going to drag her super score down, and she would avoid the placement test problem. She still underperformed what we thought she was capable of. Fabiha and Jan thought she could have got maybe a 25 on math, 28 on English, but the gap between what she can do and what she did shrunk considerably, and that's kind of what you see with severe underperformance. It doesn't always disappear, but if you can get them up here, you can get them to there. And Amber felt empowered. She told Bill stories of debating with one of these smart kids in history class. She spontaneously asked her nurse practitioner about job shadowing. She was, in Bill's words, coming into her own. So we started getting ready for June. This is the beginning of May. She had about 5.5 weeks, and she dropped her tutoring to twice a week. Once with Jan, reading, grammar, once with Fabia. Bill had 6 hours left over from his initial purchase. He had also referred a friend into us, so he got 2 free hours. So after these 8 hours, 6 paid, 2 free, after these were exhausted, he bought an additional 3 hours to tide us over. Fabia and Jan say that she was so much more collaborative. She had realized that she was a peer in this, that we were there with her, not in charge of her, so to speak. Amber wanted to work all 4 sections, so we indulged that. But we didn't tackle everything equally. We spent more energy on English and science because those seemed to have the most room to grow. So Amber worked steadily. She's very reliable in her work, and her tutors really appreciated the increased assertiveness. She was a lot more likely to ask for us to re-explain things or to slow down, and that helps us tremendously. The night before the test, Amber's still a bit nervous, but she seemed to be a lot more in control, and the next day she drove herself to the testing center, and 2 weeks later these scores come back. Wait, other way. So we all sit down with the family to discuss options. Her performance was amazing. We would love to keep her because we think she's awesome to work with. But it was our obligation to tell them that, getting to a 29 would be a long road, no guarantee of outcome. And my job as the college counselor, there was not a lot of admissions value in it or scholarship value from the colleges. So the family decided to call it quits on the ACT. I walked them through my small ball scholarship strategy, which very easily, for the amount of effort that Amber puts into things, can get them from the 75% level to the 100% level of Bright Futures in replacement money. And see, that's the thing, is if you're me or Jan or Fabia or Usher or any of us, the thing that keeps you coming back year after year, even though you work every weekend and every evening, is that moment where they get something. But even better than that is the moment when they leave, sometimes. Because if you can send them off with a test score that they needed and the admission that they wanted, that's an amazing feeling. But if you have that feeling that you did something more for them, that's just really special. That's it for this one. Please reach out to us if you'd like to talk. We'd love to talk to you. The thing we love about our job is that every kid is different. Thanks.